Have your Bibles, Ezekiel chapter 33 is where we're at. We're going to finish out this chapter starting here in verse 21. Ezekiel 33 and verse 21. Now, what we find here in this chapter is finally Ezekiel's tongue is loosened. Remember last week we talked about how Ezekiel, and back in chapter 3, God told him, I'm going to make your tongue stick to the roof of your mouth, and you won't be able to speak. You know, you can speak words of message and a prophetic word for me, but you're not going to be able to speak in a normal fashion. So he's essentially struck dumb for the last 7.5 years. So the question is what happens when your tongue is finally loosed? It was interesting this past week. I saw this little clip of a little kid just broke his arm, and his tongue was loose just from the drugs that they were pumping him up full of. And I'm going to show you this one little thing.
Walker.
Look at my gas!
We love it. But be careful, buddy.
Lay back, okay?
Lay back.
Oh,
You see my gas?
yes. Walker, relax so she can get your blood
That's
pressure.
amazing. Whoa! You see it? That's incredible. Wow. I have a cat. That's awesome. Where'd my cats go? Where's my arm? Where's my arm? I can't move my arm. Where's my arm? It's my cat.
Is she great?
What
Good.
do they eat, cats?
Good. You broke your arm.
Walker, you're
They'll
crazy.
never excuse it.
You're crazy.
I don't think you know this.
For me.
I have a cat
You did. What?
When your tongue is loosened, certain things come out that you're not necessarily planning to say. Now, like I said, for the last 7.5 years, you have Ezekiel, and his tongue has been stuck to the roof of his mouth. But now, his tongue is loosened. What will he have to say to the people? And that's what we're going to find out right here in verses 21 and 22. And this gives us a little bit of background for where we're headed here in the scripture. But take a look here, verse 21 and 22. It says, in the 12th year of our exile, in the 10th month, on the 5th day, a man who had escaped from Jerusalem came to me and said, the city has fallen. Now the evening before the man arrived, the hand of the Lord was upon me, and he opened my mouth before the man came to me in the morning. So my mouth was open, and I was no longer silent. Now, let's get a little bit of background. These two verses introduce us to what the rest of the chapter is talking about. But here in verse 21, it talks about the man has returned from Jerusalem. Now, the Babylonians set fire to Jerusalem in August 14th of 586 BC. We remember that day. 586 BC is when Jerusalem finally fell, but it was exactly on August 14th. And it is said that 5 months later, on January 8th, 585 BC, there was a fugitive, a survivor from the siege, who finally arrived in Babylon. So 5 months have passed. So he's been wandering from Jerusalem all the way over to Babylon, and finally gets the news to the rest of the captives over there in Babylon. And he finally announces to everyone that Jerusalem, the temple, it has fallen. So 5 months have passed and this news finally arrives. It is at this point that God, the night before, loosens the watchman's tongue, Ezekiel's tongue, and he's able to start speaking freely about what has occurred and what will occur to the nation of Israel, the nation of Judah, and to God's people. in this, the rest of the chapter, with Ezekiel's tongue loosened, he starts speaking simple words of, this is why we have fallen. This is why the nation has been deported, why the city has been destroyed. And so what we're going to discover here in chapter 33 to the end of this chapter, what were the circumstances surrounding the fall of Judah? And what Ezekiel does is that he addresses three harmful things that were present in the spiritual life of the nation. Now, these three things aren't just exclusive things. There were other things that surrounded the fall of the spiritual life of the nation, but these were several of the major ones that occurred in the spiritual life of the nation of Judah. But if you're following along in your outline, there were three things here. And number one is that they contained an attitude of audacity. They contained an attitude of audacity. Now, take a look here in verses 23 through 26, and this will give us a good understanding of the kind of attitude that they had in regards to God's prophecies and to his word. In verse 23, it says, "The word of the Lord came to me, Son of man," or King James, "son of dust. The people living in those ruins in the land of Israel are saying, Abraham was only one man, yet he possessed the land, but we are many. Surely the land had been given to us as our possession. Therefore say to them, this is what the sovereign Lord says. Since you eat meat with the blood still in it, and look to your idols and shed blood, should you then possess the land? You rely on your sword, you do detestable things, and each of you defiles his neighbor's wife. Should you then possess the land?" Now, let's get a little bit of context of what they're saying here. Here we have the character of Abraham. Now, the people had presumed that since they were children of Abraham, that they had an inalienable right to the land of Israel, that they had an unconditional covenant. Okay, so we're kids of Abraham. God promised to Abraham, you're going to possess this land. So, if we're all kids of him, then surely if it was just one guy who could possess the land, then all of us could. So that was their idea. And yes, God promised to the nation of Israel that they would possess the land, and this promises that would be given to them all throughout their history. Like, for example, in Micah chapter 7, verses 18 through 19, it says that, "Who is a God like you, who pardons sin and forgives our transgressions? You do not stay angry forever, but delight to show mercy, and you again will have compassion on us. You will tread our sins underfoot and hurl all of our iniquities into the depths of the sea." So people came with the promise, okay, yeah, here's Micah coming along, giving us this promise, that God's going to forgive us. Surely he's forgiven us. We're descendants of Abraham. We're going to be in this position to be blessed. We're always going to obtain this land. So the people thought, if you have just one guy, Abraham, who was able to possess the land, surely how much more his descendants, and the descendants will be always forgiven. The problem was that they presumed that if they were genetically connected to Abraham, that they would receive his blessings. But the covenant to Abraham was available only to those who kept the covenant of Abraham. It was not the physical heritage of Abraham that God was seeking, but he was seeking the spiritual heritage. The spiritual heritage of faith, and the spiritual heritage of trust, and the spiritual heritage of humility that was evident in Abraham. Not just the physical descent, but he wanted the spiritual descent of Abraham in his people. What happened is that they audaciously assumed that they were immune to judgment and were on the good side because they were sons of Abraham. They were presumptuous and they were audacious to think, oh, God will take care of us. We're good people. We follow him. And we're sons of Abraham. Now, I believe that today we reflect that same kind of attitude in our society, that we are an audacious society. We wrongly presume that we are immune to the wrath of God because we are a so-called Christian nation. And we think that because we didn't commit the atrocities of Hitler and of Stalin that we're on the righteous side. But take a look at this. In the Holocaust, during the Holocaust, Hitler and Nazi forces committed atrocities against 17 million people. Stalin, in his communist government, 23 million. But look at what happens with us. Today in the United States, we have killed 57.5 million children. To think that we are blessed of God because we're on His side, we have something else coming to us. If we think we can get away with 57.5 million of God's children sacrificed on the altar of Molech to Satan, to think that we don't have something coming to us, that is audacious. That is presumptuous, and that is thinking, oh, just because we're a Christian nation, then we're not going to get judged. We have something else coming to us. We see a lot of this happening in our society. God bless. God bless us. God bless the USA. We see a lot of that. But what we don't see is a lot of this in our society. Forgive me, God. Help us, God. We will obey you, God. We have this audacious, prideful thought in our mind that just because we are a Christian nation, that God's going to be on our side. But what God wants from us is a broken heart and a contrite spirit, and that is not what we see in our society today. James 4:8-10 says, "Draw near to God, and He will draw near to you. Cleanse your hands, you sinners, and purify your hearts, you double-minded. Lament and mourn and weep. Let your laughter be turned to mourning, your joy to gloom. Humble yourselves in the sight of the Lord, and He will lift you up." What makes us think in these United States that we are not immune to God's wrath? We have something more come to us. And Revelation says that the cup of God's wrath is filling up. It's getting deeper and deeper all the time, and one day it needs to be poured out. And I don't think that He's going to ignore the cries and the pleas of 57 million children who've been sacrificed to Satan. One day, He's going to have His just recompense against this nation of ours. If He judged Hitler, He judged Stalin, surely there's something else coming for us here. Here's some examples of how audacious we are becoming as a society, as we are becoming more anti-God. You take, for example, over there in Phoenix today, the Phoenix City Council opened up in prayer. Pretty nice. Opened up in prayer, but they opened up in prayer from Satanists. We are becoming audaciously more brazen anti-God as we go along. Look at just some of this news. Over there in southern Iraq, they are building the largest building right now. It is, take a look at what the Tower of Babel was like. It's planned and it's built just like the same exact thing, the kind of spiral context right there. It's going to be the largest building in the world. We're rebuilding Babylon. We're rebuilding Babel. We are, at the same time, ISIS has destroyed the oldest monastery in Iraq. We are slowly, well, actually quickly becoming more anti-God. You have the oldest monastery in Iraq just completely leveled. And saying, you know what, God, we don't want anything with you. We're going to build our monuments, centers of human culture and everything. We don't really care what you think. This kind of audacious attitude was present at Babel, and let me tell you, it'll be present at the time of the end. It'll be present in the last days. You couple this with a lot of just crazy things that are happening. Take, for example, like this current period of seismic unrest is one of the largest ever recorded in a volcano globally. There's so much volcanic activity going on right here in Guatemala, Indonesia, Russia, Mexico, Chile, Italy. It presents an unprecedented unrest physically and geopolitically and spiritual environment that has not existed before our time. You take what's happening in the world today, geopolitically and physically, it's like this has never happened before. And that's what scientists and politicians are saying these days, that it's crazy. There's this attitude of audacity, and as we are more and more anti-God, there's going to be an answer and a call for God to present justice against those kind of harmful attitudes and those harmful behaviors of his people. So there was an attitude of audacity present within the nation here in the Old Testament, and it's present today. You also see within the nation there was an artificial sense of security. An artificial sense of security. Look at verses 23 through 29, and it gives us a good picture of what happens here. Actually, verse 27, right there, it says, say this to them. This is what the sovereign Lord says. As surely as I live, those who are left in the ruins will fall by the sword. Those out in the country I will give to the wild animals to be devoured, and those in strongholds and caves will die of the plague. I will make the land a desolate waste, and her proud strength will come to an end, and the mountains of Israel will become desolate, so that no one will cross them. And they will know that I am the Lord, when I have made the land a desolate waste because of all the detestable things they have done. Now, Warren Wiersbe has something to say about these verses, and he says that the Babylonians had left some of the poor people to take care of the fields and the ruins of Jerusalem, while the rest who survived the siege were taken to Babylon. The Lord heard what these people were saying. We have a right to this land because the Lord spared us to live there. So, get the picture here. You have the nation kind of devastated. You have one group sent off to Babylon. They're in captivity, and there's another group who was left in the land, the poor people, and they were left to tend the land over there in the nation of Israel. Now, the problem was that they had forgotten what God had told Jeremiah. In Jeremiah chapter 24, God showed Jeremiah 2 baskets of figs. So he had a basket of really good figs, and he had a basket of some very bad ones. And the very good figs that were shown to Jeremiah represented the exiles in Babylon. Really nice fig. Those ones would be brought over to Babylon. The really bad ones, the remnant, the very bad figs were King Zedekiah and the leaders in Jerusalem who disobeyed the Lord by breaking the treaty with Babylon. And Jeremiah said, okay, the good figs represented the good people, they're headed to Babylon. These bad ones, they stay in the land. What this goes to show is that just because of the people who were left in the land, just because they were in a relatively safe environment, didn't mean that they were going to be immune to God's judgment. God said of these bad figs that they would be judged, that they would experience the judgment of God. This is reflective of an attitude of, or something that occurs in our society today as well. What this is called is commonly called by sociologists and a lot of theologians, and they call this the cul-de-sac effect. Okay? In a cul-de-sac, you're kind of, isolated. You're kind of, away from problems. You have your own little corner of the community. You're out of reach, you're protected. But what they have found is that within the cul-de-sac communities, it turned out is that they have some of the highest rates of traffic accidents in there. And And what happens is that a lot of kids playing in these little circles are actually hit by cars. And it's actually one of the more dangerous places to live. Even though you're thinking, okay, I'm safe in my little tucked away corner here, that I'm going to be protected. But actually, these are one of the more, what they're finding is that they're one of the more dangerous places to live. In the same kind of idea, in the national sense and in the ecclesiastical sense, that there is danger just kind of huddling in your own place, thinking, okay, I'm safe. It's the same thing that happened right here within the nation of Israel. You had these people who were in this dangerous area over there in Babylon, but you had this group that was the bad figs, and they were in Jerusalem. They're in their caves, they're in their little houses, and they were left to tend the land, and they were thinking they were all safe in this, but God said, no. In your isolationism, in your neutrality, in all of your trying to protect yourself, you're going to be experiencing even more devastating effects. And that's what we call the cul-de-sac effect. People who think that they're safe in the neutral zone and their protected areas actually are going to find themselves in a little bit more danger that way. It happened in a national sense and an ecclesiastical sense. One author wrote here that no one thrives in isolationism and neutrality. Think about North Korea. Let's close our borders. No one thrived in that kind of neutral sense. The U.S., the United States, before World War II, neutral, isolationist, just set ourselves up for more problems along the way. And here with the nation of Israel, I'm going to isolate myself, I'm going to be alone. But in that isolationism and that neutrality, they found themselves even more prone to attack. So, what happens here with the nation of Israel, so instead of inheriting the land, becoming rich, all these bad figs left in the nation, the people would be slain by the sword, the beasts of the field, or the pestilence that often accompanies war. Instead of the land becoming their prized possession, it will become desolate and enjoy its Sabbath rest. So that what they had, number two, is they had an artificial sense of security. Number one was that they had an attitude of audacity. Number three, they had an affinity for amusement. They had an affinity for amusement. Look at verses 30 to 32. It says, "As for you, son of man, your countrymen are talking together about you by the walls and at the doors of the houses, saying to each other, 'Come, and hear the message that has come from the Lord.' My people come to you as they usually do, and they sit before you to listen to your words, but they do not put them into practice. With their mouths they express devotion, but their hearts are greedy for unjust gain. Indeed, to them who are nothing more than one who sings love songs with a beautiful voice and plays an instrument well, for they hear your words, but they do not put them into practice." What you're seeing happening here within the nation of Israel is that they have a preoccupation with just simply being entertained with the words of the prophet. Just kind of focused on one singular thing and not realizing all that else is going on. They're just focused on being entertained. It's kind of like this guy right here. You don't realize everything that's happening. You're just kind of focused on this one singular movement. Now, let me give you a little paper trick. I need a kid to help me out here. Okay. How about Lodge? Yeah, come on up. Okay. Now, I got this piece of paper out a little bit earlier, and I'm just wondering if you can explain this to me, because I have this paper, but somehow all I did was cut it. But can you explain how this happened? So you see this right here? There's a section cut out here, a section over here. I don't know. Can you explain how this came to be? Because there's no, I mean, you fold it this way and you fold it that way. I have no idea what, there's no explanation? Can you try to figure it out? No? You're just going to stand there and look at it, see what happens. Now see what happened with this little piece of paper is that all I did was make 3 cuts with it, but it looks like right here that there's 2 sections, and what I did is that I simply went like this, okay, and I cut it right here, cut it right there, and then just folded it like this. But it looks like, oh my goodness, how do you explain that certain thing right there? Okay, so I want you to take that and show it to your friends and say, explain this to me, okay? So, good job. All right, give it a round of applause. Now, what had happened here is that I preoccupied Odge with, okay, here's this seemingly weird thing before me. I don't know how to explain it. If I can preoccupy someone with a simple thing, something that can be explained simply, but in their minds think that it's complicated, then I have distracted them from that simple solution and fixing the problem. Now, this is what happens with us in our modern day context, is that if we can have people focused on something else, on something very simple, then we can distract them from the big problem and find the solution to the big problem. Simple thing of distracting individuals. So here's the context. I'm going to wrap this all into a singular point right here. As the exiles met one another during the hot day, they would step out in the hot sunlight and discuss the prophet's ministry, right here in 33:30, and they even invited people to come in with them to hear the preacher, but going to hear the word of God wasn't a serious thing to them. And so they said, come, let's have some fun, let's go hear the prophet tell us what the Lord is saying. What happened here is that they saw Ezekiel as an entertainer. They were distracted by the prophet. They were distracted. Hey, let's check this guy out. He's been laying on his side for 390 days. He's cooking his bread over human dung. Yep, let's just go check him out. He was like a circus act. And so they were just making fun of him. They were just distracted by this guy, and they're just entertained by him. They didn't see him as an exhorter who sought to convey God's love to them. They saw him as an entertainer, and as it says, a guy who would play instruments and sing love songs right there in verse 32. He was just a sideshow. They were distracted, and they wanted to be entertained. And what occurs, interestingly, is that as people are distracted, is that they lose track of the bigger picture and the bigger focus. This is something that Chuck Swindoll talks about in the spiritual life of Christians today, is that today we are so often caught up in all of our activities, all the things that are going on, that we tend to worship our work, we work at our play, and we play at our worship. Because we are so distracted and we're so active that we have our priorities misplaced. And I see this happening more and more even in our own lives as a family, that as we get distracted, we lose track of what's most important. It can happen in a church. We get distracted by internal things and problems that we forget the bigger picture. It can happen in our society as a whole. And I find one of the things, just like the nation of Israel, is that they had this preoccupation just to be entertained and to essentially play at their worship, that they just simply would sit back and just, oh, let's check out this watchman, do all these crazy things, shave his head, burn his hair, let's go check him out. Okay, so what happens here is that as a result of this need to be amused and entertained, the result is oftentimes a lack of social function. This was evident in Ezekiel's time. As people became entertained, you have natural reaction of the loss of social function, the ability to interact with people on a positive basis. Take, for example, like what happened with the Romans and the Colosseum, and you had these gladiators out there that in their endeavors to be entertained, to stimulate those reward centers of their brain, to watch these guys battle it out, and that desire to be entertained, forgot these are actually living human beings right there. In that reward center and that desire to be entertained, they forget that humanity. It's what happens in our culture. In our desire to be entertained, we lose out that social dynamic of empathy. So you take, for example, we go to a basketball game, and in our desire to be entertained by the game, we say, oh man, that ref is an idiot. Man, what a jerk, he made that horrible call. Because in that desire to be entertained and to be distracted, have those pleasure centers engaged, we forget the humanity of that individual. That person probably has a family, and he's out there running the courts because he wants to provide for them. You see what happens? And it's an endemic problem that stemmed all the way also from Ezekiel's time to our time today. Take, for example, what's happened in our society today. They have done a 3-decade analysis of prior research that reveals that American college students are not quite as empathetic as they used to be. They don't have this empathy, they don't have this compassion as their parents do. Now, we found the biggest drop in empathy after the year 2000. Co-author Sarah Conrath, a researcher at the University of Michigan Institute for Social Research, said in a news release, college kids today are about 40% lower in empathy than their counterparts of 20 or 30 years ago, as measured by the standard test of this personality trait. The analysis indicated that relative to their late 1970s counterparts, today college students are less likely to make an effort to understand their friends' perspectives or feel tenderness or concern for the less fortunate. Many people see the current group of college students, sometimes called Generation Me, as one of the most self-centered, narcissistic, competitive, confident, and individualistic in recent history. So what do we stem this from? Why are they becoming less and less empathetic? And this is what the result of the study has shown, that the increase in exposure to media during this time period could be one factor. Compared to 30 years ago, the average American now is exposed to 3 times as much non-work related information. Exposure to an increasingly hyper-competitive social environment might also contribute towards the apparent trend the authors noted as could a shift toward maintaining friendships online through social media sites, given that the ability to tune out and not respond when conversing online could translate into a learned behavior that in turn gets expressed face-to-face. Let me translate this for you. As we seek to be more entertained and more engaged with entertainment, what happens is that the social empathy just loses out. You start engaging those pleasure centers. Entertainment, sitting back. What happens is that it's like a drug, and then you lose out on relationship. And that's a consequence of what we're seeing happening in our students today and in college students today, is that as they're wanting to be entertained, and it's not just college students, the adults as well, because we're always on the phone. Oh, look at this, I got 200 points on like Candy Crush or whatever, I don't know. But we have this entertainment need, and then all of a sudden it's scientific evidence, you start losing out that empathetic attitude that is so necessary in our engagement with one another. I read a story about a couple in South Korea. They were raising a virtual daughter online. Okay? You know, like those I don't know. You know, we used to have gigapets or things like that back in the 90s, but they were raising a virtual daughter online, and they forgot about their real daughter in the other room, and that daughter actually starved to death. In their desire to be engaged and entertained, they forgot about the real relationship. And it happens more often than not. It's a problem that's evident right here in Ezekiel. Oh, let's listen to this prophet and we forget that he's a living human being. And it's an endemic problem that is affecting our society in major ways. And so that third thing is that they had an affinity for amusement. Now, we today in our society, we can find ourselves in the same exact place. And God is asking us, as he has told the watchman, Ezekiel, turn from these things. I look at this list and I'm like, you know what? I can fall in that same trap. That constant need to be entertained. The constant need to maybe have that wrongful attitude. To think that just because I'm a Christian, God has to bless me. It was the same attitude that Israelites had. Maybe it's that false sense of security. That trust in finances, that trust in things, or maybe it's that constant need to be amused with things. I don't know what it is, but we can fall in that same trap that the nation of Judah fell in. And so my question to myself that I just relate to you today is, will you give all of that to him? Will you turn from it and say, Lord, I messed up. I had the wrong attitude towards things. I give it all to you. Let me finish out with this little clip. It's called Trash. Let's take a look at it.
Hey, Kat.
Jesus!
Oh, it's been a long time.
Yeah, I didn't expect to see you here.
Whoa, what's that smell?
Smell? Oh, well, that's my trash. I'm a little embarrassed about it.
Oh, well, is that why you've been avoiding me?
Avoiding you? I haven't really been avoiding you. I just, I don't want to get close to you. I mean, I don't want you to smell it.
I'll take it, Kat. Come
Oh,
on.
no, that's okay. I mean, I made it. It's my trash. I should carry it. It's okay.
Yeah, but Kat, I mean, this is my job.
Right.
I take people's trash. That's what I do, so...
Right, okay, well maybe I could go and just clean it up a little bit, and then I'll come back.
No, Kat, I don't need you to do that. Okay? I'll take it from you so you don't have to carry the weight.
Oh, well,
Come on. Just hand it over. All right? Let go. Let go. Yeah. How's that feel?
Weird. Wow. That is crazy.
Just loosen it up a little bit.
Shake that out. I've never moved like that before. I mean, that is crazy. I feel so free and alive.
It's the lack of trash.
No, it's just like, this is the craziest feeling I have ever had. It's like something's missing,
Get used to feeling free, because that's what you are now.
Right, okay.
What are you doing?
I gotta get one thing, okay? Hold on.
Get one thing. No, don't open the bag.
Thank you so much for your sacrifice. I really appreciate all that you've done for me.
What's going on here, Kat?
What?
Look, I'll take the trash, but you need to put that back.
Oh, no, actually, that's okay. This is mine. It's my piece. I want to keep it.
No, it goes right back in the bag, so I'll help you. Here, put it here.
No, Jesus, I need to remind myself not to make more trash. I mean, that just
Kathleen,
makes sense.
I will remind you not to make more trash.
Oh,
okay?
well, Jesus,
That's what I do. I mean, we'll walk together.
I know, but I should be in a better place than this by now. I mean, I'm constantly doing things wrong, and I'm constantly letting you down.
No, the only thing that's letting me down is you taking the stuff back.
Okay.
Look, I took care of the trash before you even created it. Look, don't you see what's happening? Every time I take your trash away, you come back and take another piece. And the more pieces you carry around, the more trash you attract. It reeks. Kat, when I look at you, I don't see your sin. I see you. The real you, the free you. This is what I'm fighting for. This is what I died for.
Jesus, I'm sorry. Please forgive me.
I've already forgiven you. The question is, will you forgive yourself?
Thing is, we don't have to live in that guilt and that shame. We don't have to live in it anymore. All those angry and hateful things that we just, oh, I'm going to hold on to it. He's just saying, just give it to me. Let me tell you, it's hard to let go, but once you do, it is so, so freeing. So I'm asking you today, you know exactly where your heart is before the Lord. And He's telling you, let go of the garbage. It's get out of the place. Once you do, you're going to be so free and so joyful. Will you do that today? Will you say to Him, Lord, I surrender all? Let's sing that, actually. And I want us to make this as a prayer of our hearts. And I want you to stay seated for this one, but just make it as a humble prayer before the Lord. It's number 404 in your hymn book. And we're going to sing this a cappella and sing it just as if you were saying to God, I have this bag of garbage on my shoulder, and now I'm saying, God, I surrender all to you. I'm giving it to you. I'm not going to hold a single piece for myself, because that's exactly why you came to this earth, was to free me from sin. So I'm not going to hold on to it anymore. So would you make that as a prayer of your heart? If you know the words, just simply close your eyes and just pray it out to God. If it was just you and Him alone here in this room, just say, Lord, all to Jesus, all to you, I surrender. Will you just pray that out to Him? Let's sing this together. Say it.